We're going to continue our coverage of the verdict in the Sean Combs trial. The jury, made up of 8 men and 4 women, deliberated for 2 days. On the third day, they found the hip-hop mogul guilty on charges of transportation to engage in prostitution.
But jurors acquitted him of the most serious charges in a case that featured salacious allegations that he coerced women into sexual encounters with other men, sometimes referred to as freak-offs or hotel nights or king nights. The 55-year-old music mogul charged with 5 counts, but was only convicted of 2 that have a maximum time of 10 years in prison each.
Now, his family, they've been in the court nearly every day since he was arrested nearly 1 year ago. Well, today they walked out of the courthouse hand in hand. His mother, Janice, at one point pumped her fist in the air, a sign of victory. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles has been covering this story since the start of trial back in May. She's outside the court this afternoon with more. Darla?
Patsy Ventura was just...
Andra and Mike, you know, we just saw that sketch of Sean Combs kneeling in prayer, and over the last 24 hours, that is what we have seen since the jury began its deliberations. The family has held several group prayers inside of the courtroom, and this morning, as the jury began to deliberate again, because they were still hung on that first count, he led them in a prayer asking God to bless their hearts. He was praying for a not guilty verdict and for God to watch over his family. He then sat down at his seat and read Psalms 11. It was a printout of Psalms 11 as the court proceeding began. He never looked up. You could see he was meditating, really focused on what was going to come his way. They didn't know what this mixed verdict was this morning, and so his attorneys were very anxious this morning as they came into the courtroom, somber faces, not knowing what to expect and how long it might take to deliberate on count 1 where they were hung yesterday. So then when Judge Arun Subramanian came, he read the note. He said the note was returned at 9:52 a.m. saying that they had reached a verdict on all 5 counts. And then he brought the jury into the room to read their verdict one by one, count by count. The first verdict, racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. You saw him do a fist pump. And he was still looking down. He never looked up. He was still kind of meditating, anticipating all of the verdicts for each count. And so then they listed sex trafficking, Cassie Ventura. He nodded his head. Interstate prostitution for Cassie Ventura. Guilty. He was shocked. He was visibly affected when that one came. You could tell he was not ready for that to come, like a kinetic, like a real serious shock, because I think, you know, once you start hearing the repetitive not guilty verdicts, there may have been an assumption that there was going to continue to be a not guilty verdict. So then after that, as they began to read the verdicts, he grabbed Teddy Garagos' hand. They were fist pumping. His attorneys were complete 180. They couldn't even sit down waiting for the verdict to be read. They were nervous, and they were kind of spread out. It was almost like a security detail. One was positioned here, one was positioned here, one was positioned back there, and they were pacing back and forth, waiting for that verdict to be read. They were all seated when the verdict was read. They were all smiling. When Judge Arun Subramanian then polled the juror to ask juror number 1, juror number 2, juror number 3, is this your verdict? Each one of them said yes, yes, yes. That is when we saw a moment when Sean Combs reached over to one of his lead attorneys, Teddy Garagos. He grabbed her, he kissed her on the cheek, beaming and smiling. During this time, he leaned back. He kept turning towards his family. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. It's going to be okay. And also, as they were polling the jury, you could see Sean Combs looking at them, trying to make eye contact with them with his hands. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. That's kind of like a humility that he's shown throughout the trial, communications that he was actually admonished for during the trial for trying to make eye contact with the jury and connect with them. I don't believe any juror looked back at him. You could see a few of them kind of smiling, looking downwards, but I was focused on Sean Combs. He was about 10 feet to my left the entire trial, where he was seated at his defense table and the press row. And so he just kept thanking the jury. As the jury exited, he again was just thanking the jury, thanking the jury. And that is when we saw that dramatic moment. When the jury exited the courtroom, he dropped down to his knees. No one saw it coming. You looked over, he was on his knees, very prayerful, being very thankful for the verdict that was rendered, being acquitted of all of those charges. His family, as they have been known to do, when they get into this moment of prayer, they all bow their head. They were standing, they bowed their head, and then when he stood up, then there was loud cheers in the courtroom, loud cheers, a couple of outbursts of cheers. You saw him hugging his attorney, hugging Tini Garagos, Mark Agnifilo, his face beet red, group hugs. You know, he has 9 attorneys, so they were group hugging. You could hear them saying, "Dream team, dream team." I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo. I asked him, you know, he said he's never felt like this in 34 years. I said, well, what does that feel like? He said, I am relieved that I'm not miserable. When the not guilty verdict, when he was acquitted of all those top charges, Judge Arun Subramanian said, government, is there anything from the government? The government said no. Then he asked Mark Agnifilo, is there something from the defense? He goes, absolutely. I believe this defendant, having been acquitted of the most serious charges, he should be returned to his family. He should be able to return to his home at 2 Star Island. He said that he treasures this opportunity and he would never run afoul of any opportunities should he be released on bail. Maureen Comey, the lead prosecutor for this case, stood up. She vigorously fought against the bail the same way she vigorously argued this entire case, saying, listen, these underlying circumstances still exist. You heard the testimony. You heard what these victims testified to in terms of the violence and the threats, and these are still mitigating factors, and they still exist. At that point, Tini Garagos, you could see her going off. She was pointing her finger at Mark Agnifilo, just kind of like, you could just frustrated that there was still no, the government was still relentless in their prosecution of Sean Combs. Then the judge asked specific questions. What does this look like? If he is released on bail, Mark Agnifilo, what does that look like? Does he walk out of the front door today? He said, absolutely yes. I don't have a bail package prepared, a formal bail package, which is required in this situation, but off the cuff, we propose $1 million. We have 3 responsible family members who are here who can sign for the bail. We already have his passport. We rented out his plane. His plane is in Maui right now, so has no access to his personal plane. So he will never, he would not jeopardize any opportunity there would be should he be released on bail. And then Judge Subramanian asked Combs, I'm sure you don't want to go back to MDC. He comically shook his head, no, and he's been known to kind of react like that in trial. Laughter burst out in the courtroom. Obviously, there was levity, having been acquitted of the most serious counts. So he shook his head, no, like, I definitely don't want to go back there. And so only within an hour, both parties have to submit an official letter. Mark Agnifilo, what does that bail package look like? And do you have a person to execute this bail package? You have to meet with pretrial services before you can completely execute a bail package. And then the prosecution has to present case law. Under these circumstances, have we had a circumstance where you have a defendant who has still been convicted of 2 counts of interstate prostitution? Should they still be released on bond? So Comey again said this is off the cuff. We weren't expecting it, but we need to dig into the case law, and we need to come back with a letter saying why we oppose it. And this is no different than any of the fierce infighting we have seen throughout this trial. Neither side has been given an inch when it comes to the one single line of the wording that goes back to the jury responses, what text messages are in, what videos go in. They are fighting tooth and nail this entire trial. The jury has been paying attention this entire trial. They've been talking to each other even when they were told not to talk to each other about the trial. We saw them reacting to the testimony. So this is a culmination of 2 months, 8 weeks of long days of testimony, sometimes laborious testimony with federal agents just reading out text messages, going through the inventory of what was found at the searches of each of his homes, the LA home, the Miami home, and his mother has been in trial every day, in the courtroom every day. His sons come mostly every day. We did see his 3 daughters at the beginning of the trial, but when it began to get heavy with the testimony.
Darla has been describing the emotion in the courtroom just a short time ago. That is Sean Combs' mother. They are really, really close. Her waving to the crowd, obviously relieved that the verdict essentially went her son's way this morning. He was not convicted of the most serious charges.